The Galactic Research Station Eternal Horizon hung in the darkness of space like a silver needle floating in ink. Below it, if such a word had meaning in the void, swirled a nightmare that every species in the known galaxy feared. They called it the Maw, a collapsed neutron star surrounded by gravitational forces so twisted and strange that nothing sent into its boundary had ever come back. Not probes, not ships, not living creatures, nothing. Unipark did not think about the Maw as she crawled across the station's outer hull. She thought about the damaged sensor array that needed fixing, about the cold seeping through her suit despite the heating systems, and about the cup of hot tea waiting for her when she finished this job. She was 28 years old, a lieutenant in the Human Engineering Corps, and she had performed this kind of maintenance work 100 times before. The station housed scientists from 12 different alien species, the tall crystalline beings called Velthari, who sparkled like living diamonds under any light, the Solrine, who lived in water-filled suits and spoke in bubbling whispers, the insectoid Karathi, whose clicking language still gave Una headaches after 2 years of learning it. All of them had come here to study the Maw from a safe distance. All of them believed they understood its dangers. Una tightened a bolt and checked her work. The sensor array blinked green. Job done. She began making her way back toward the airlock, her magnetic boots clicking against the hull with each step. Then the station shook. It was a small tremor, the kind that happened when the station adjusted its orbit to maintain safe distance from the Maw. Una had felt hundreds of them, but this time something was different. This time she heard a snap that made her heart stop. Her safety tether had broken. Una grabbed for the hull, but her gloved fingers found nothing to hold. The station's slight rotation, normally unnoticeable, now became a force that pushed her away from the metal surface. She tumbled backward, spinning slowly, watching the station grow smaller with each passing second. "Control, this is Park," she said into her communicator, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I have lost tether connection. I am drifting." The response came immediately, filled with controlled panic. "Lieutenant Park, we see you. Hold position. We are calculating retrieval options." But Una knew the math. She had studied this station's systems for 2 years. She knew exactly where she was drifting, and she knew that the retrieval drones could not reach her in time. The gap in the station's shielding, the one they had been meaning to repair for months, was directly behind her. And beyond that gap was the gravitational pull of the Maw. She passed through the shield boundary. She felt it like walking through a curtain of cold water. And then the pulling started. On the observation deck of the Eternal Horizon, Commander Tai Wan Beck watched the small figure of his engineer disappear into the darkness. He was 41 years old, a decorated pilot who had survived 3 wars and countless dangerous missions. He had watched people die before, but never like this, never so slowly, so helplessly. "Calculate her path," he ordered. The station's artificial intelligence responded in its calm, emotionless voice. "Lieutenant Park will cross the survival threshold in 47 seconds. Beyond that point, gravitational forces will prevent any possibility of retrieval." The aliens on the deck fell silent. The Velthari ambassador, a being of purple crystal named something unpronounceable in human language, stopped mid-sentence in their conversation. The Solrine scientists stopped their constant bubbling. Even the Karathi stopped clicking. They all knew what the survival threshold meant. They had a name for the space beyond it. They called it the stillness, because everything that entered it became still, forever. "Is there nothing we can do?" Taiwan asked, though he already knew the answer. "Negative, Commander. No ship in our fleet can safely enter the boundary zone. The gravitational shearing would destroy any vessel within seconds of crossing." Taiwan's hands tightened into fists. He stared at the screen showing Yuna's position. A small blue dot moving steadily toward a red line. Once she crossed that line, she would be gone. Just another piece of debris in the cosmic graveyard that surrounded the Maw. 20 seconds to threshold, the AI announced. Yuna's voice came through the communicator one more time. She sounded scared, but also strangely calm, like someone who had accepted something terrible but refused to let it break her. "Commander, I want you to know that this was not anyone's fault. The tether was old. Things break. That is how the universe works." Taewan could not speak. His throat had closed up. 10 seconds to threshold. I am still here, Yuna continued. I can see the stars. They look beautiful from out here, different than from inside the station. 5 seconds. I will find a way back. I do not know how yet, but I will figure something out. That is what engineers do, right? We solve problems. Threshold crossed. The blue dot on the screen turned gray. Yuna's communicator signal broke into static, then went silent. The observation deck remained frozen, a room full of beings from across the galaxy, all staring at the point where a human woman had just vanished into certain death. The Velthari ambassador moved first. They walked to stand beside Taiwan, their crystalline body humming with low, mournful frequencies. She spoke as if death was negotiable, the ambassador said, as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions she could argue with. Taiwan did not take his eyes off the screen. That is because to humans, they are. The ambassador made a sound that might have been confusion or disbelief. Commander, I have studied your species for many years. I have learned your languages, your histories, your cultures, but I still do not understand this about you. How can you face the impossible and still speak of solutions? Taiwan finally looked away from the screen. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. Because giving up is not in our nature. Evolution did not design us to surrender. Our ancestors survived ice ages, predators, famines, and wars. They passed down one simple lesson encoded in our very cells. Never stop trying. Even when there is no hope, we try anyway. He looked back at the gray dot that marked Yuna's last known position. She said she would find a way back. I believe her, and I will be ready when she does. The aliens exchanged glances. They did not understand. They thought the commander was in denial, unable to accept the obvious truth that Lieutenant Park was dead. No species had ever survived beyond the survival threshold. The records were clear. The science was certain. But Taiwan knew something they did not. He knew Yuna Park, and he knew that certainty meant nothing to a human who had decided to live. Light did not behave correctly here. It curved in spirals, twisted back on itself, formed loops and knots that hurt her brain to look at. The stars she could see through her helmet were stretched into long lines, some red, some blue. As if someone had dragged a paintbrush across the sky. Time felt wrong too, heavy, slow, like moving through honey instead of empty space. She checked her suit's instruments. Most of them showed error messages. The ones that still worked gave readings that made no sense. According to her radiation detector, she should have received a lethal dose within the first 3 seconds of crossing the threshold. According to her clock, she had been drifting for 6 hours. According to everything the galaxy knew about this place, she should be dead. But she was not dead. She was cold, scared, and very confused. But she was alive. Okay, she said to herself, because talking helped her think. Okay, the rules here are different. That means I need to learn the new rules. This was how Yuna had always approached problems. When something did not work the way it was supposed to, you did not waste time being angry or sad about it. You studied it. You found the patterns. You adapted. She began paying attention to her surroundings instead of panicking about them. The gravitational forces pulling at her were strong, but they were not constant. They came in waves like the tide on a beach. There were moments of calm between the pulling, moments when she could actually control her movement a little bit. She used her suit's small maneuvering jets during one of these calm moments, adjusting her spin so she could see more of her environment. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. There were shapes in the darkness ahead, large shapes, ships maybe, or stations. Dozens of them, scattered across the twisted space like leaves fallen from a tree. Some were close enough that she could make out details, broken hulls, dark windows, the remains of what had once been proud vessels from 100 different civilizations. She was not the first to come here. She was just the latest. Back on the eternal horizon, Dr. Hanacho refused to sleep. She had been Yuna's friend since training academy, had shared meals with her, complained about commanding officers with her, celebrated birthdays, and mourned losses with her. She was not ready to add Yuna to the list of people she had lost. Hana was a xenobiologist, which meant she studied alien life forms. But she was also a scientist, which meant she knew how to look at data and find things other people missed. So while everyone else on the station mourned and moved on, Hana sat in her lab and stared at the readings from the maw. Show me everything from the past 12 hours, she told her computer. Every sensor, every frequency, every data point. I want to see it all. The computer complied, filling her screens with numbers and graphs and wave patterns. Most of it was normal background noise, the constant radio hum of the universe. But buried in that noise, barely visible unless you knew to look for it, was something strange. A rhythm, a beat, something repeating at regular intervals coming from inside the maw. Hana's heart began to race. She enhanced the signal, cleaned it up, compared it to known patterns. And then she understood what she was seeing. It was a heartbeat, human, steady, strong. Yuna's suit had an emergency beacon that transmitted basic life signs on a frequency designed to cut through almost any interference. The engineers who designed it had never imagined it would need to work inside a gravitational anomaly like the maw. But somehow, against all odds, it was working. Hana ran to the observation deck so fast she nearly knocked down a Karathi scientist in the hallway. She burst through the door, breathing hard, and found Commander Beck still standing where she had left him hours ago, still staring at the screens. "She is alive," Hana announced. Everyone turned to look at her. The aliens made sounds of confusion and disbelief. Taiwan's expression did not change, but something in his eyes came back to life. "Show me," he said. Hana connected her portable display to the main screen. The heartbeat signal appeared, steady and clear. 72 beats per minute, exactly what you would expect from a healthy human woman at rest. "This is impossible," the Veltari ambassador said. "The radiation alone should have destroyed her cellular structure within minutes. Our scientists proved this centuries ago." Hana shook her head. "Your scientists studied Velthari biology, and Solrine biology, and Karathi biology. But humans are different. Our cells repair themselves constantly. Our immune systems adapt to new threats. Our bodies are designed to survive in hostile environments." She pulled up comparative data on the screen. "Look at this. The radiation levels inside the maw are high, but they are not instantly lethal to human tissue. We can survive exposure that would kill most other species. Not forever, but long enough to matter." Taewon nodded slowly. "How long does she have?" "I do not know. Days, maybe. Weeks if she is lucky and careful. But Commander, she is alive right now. That means rescue is possible." The alien representatives began talking among themselves, their various languages creating a chaos of sounds. The idea that anyone could survive in the maw was challenging everything they believed. The idea that humans specifically might be suited to that environment was even more disturbing. Taewon ignored them all. He was already thinking about ships, supplies, routes. His mind was solving the problem of rescue while others were still arguing about whether rescue was possible. "Dr. Cho," he said, "I need you to design shielding that can protect a small shuttle inside the boundary zone. Use everything we know about Lieutenant Park's suit transmissions. If her equipment is surviving in there, we can figure out why and apply the same principles to a larger vessel." Hana nodded. "I will start immediately." "Good. I want to design within 48 hours. As Hana rushed back to her lab, Taewon turned to face the alien representatives. They had stopped talking and were watching him with expressions that ranged from pity to confusion. "Commander," the Karathi captain clicked, "you cannot seriously intend to attempt a rescue mission. Even if the human woman is temporarily alive, no ship has ever returned from beyond the threshold. You would be adding more deaths to a tragedy that has already occurred." Taiwan smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had made a decision and would not be moved from it. "That is where you are wrong, Captain. The tragedy has not occurred yet. A tragedy occurs when people give up, when they accept loss without fighting, when they decide that the impossible is actually impossible." He turned back to the screen showing Yuna's heartbeat signal. "As long as that signal keeps beating, there is no tragedy. There is only a problem waiting to be solved." The Karathi made a clicking sound that translated roughly as frustrated disbelief. "You humans are insane." "Probably," Taewon agreed, "but that insanity has kept our species alive through extinction events that should have ended us. And it will keep Lieutenant Park alive until I can bring her home." Somewhere in the twisted darkness of the maw, Yuna found a piece of debris large enough to hold on to. She wrapped her arms around it, stopped her spinning, and took her first steady breath in what felt like forever. She was terrified. She was exhausted. But she was also thinking clearly now. Her engineer's mind cataloging resources and possibilities. She had air for another 18 hours. She had water for 12. She had the maneuvering jets, still half full. And she had her brain, which had gotten her out of bad situations before. Okay, she said again. Step 1, find shelter. Step 2, find supplies. Step 3, find a way home. It was a simple plan. Simple was good. Simple kept you moving when complicated made you freeze. She looked toward the shapes of the dead ships floating in the distance and began planning her route. Yuna reached the first ship after what felt like hours of careful movement. She had learned to read the gravitational waves by now, to feel when they were coming, embrace herself, to move only during the calm periods between them. It was exhausting work, but it kept her alive. The ship she approached was old, very old. Its design was nothing she recognized from any of the species she knew. The hull was made of a dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols covered its surface, worn almost smooth by time and radiation. Whatever civilization had built this vessel had been dead for so long that no one remembered they had ever existed. Yuna found an airlock that still functioned, barely. She had to force it open with her suit's emergency tools, but once inside she discovered that the ship still had atmosphere, thin and stale but breathable if she was careful. She opened her helmet and took a slow breath. It smelled like dust and ancient things, like a museum that had been sealed for 1,000 years. She explored carefully, her helmet light cutting through the darkness. The ship's corridors were tall and narrow, built for beings that were not shaped like humans. She found control rooms filled with equipment she could not understand, sleeping quarters with beds that looked like standing tubes, and storage areas packed with containers of unknown substances. But she also found something useful: food, or at least something that her suit's analyzer said was probably food. Small cubes of a brownish substance that contained proteins and carbohydrates and would not poison her. She ate one. It tasted like cardboard mixed with something vaguely sweet. She did not care. It was nutrients, and nutrients meant survival. After resting for a few hours, Yuna continued exploring the graveyard. She moved from ship to ship, each one belonging to a different species, each one telling a story of disaster. Some had clearly been research vessels, sent to study the maw just like the Eternal Horizon. Others looked like military ships, perhaps sent on rescue missions that failed. A few were so alien that Yuna could not guess their purpose at all. The fifth ship she entered was different. It was newer than the others, and she recognized its design immediately. Velthari, the crystalline beings who lived on the station with her, had sent ships here before. This one had been lost 300 years ago, according to the records Yuna had studied during her time on the Eternal Horizon, a scientific expedition that crossed the threshold and never returned. Everyone assumed the crew had died instantly, like all the others. But inside the ship, Yuna found logs, personal recordings made by the Velthari crew members during their final weeks. She played them on the ship's still-functioning computer system, and what she learned changed everything. The Velthari had survived, not forever, but for weeks. Long enough to explore, to study, to understand parts of what was happening here. Their crystalline bodies had eventually broken down from the radiation, but before they died, they had recorded their discoveries. The maw was not natural, it had been built. According to the logs, the gravitational anomaly surrounding the collapsed star was created by technology far beyond anything the current galactic community possessed. Someone, millions of years ago, had constructed a barrier here, a cage made of twisted space and deadly radiation. And at the center of that cage, behind something the logs called the threshold gate, was the thing being imprisoned. The Velthari had not been able to learn much about the prisoner. Their instruments could not penetrate the gate, but they had theories, passed down from ancient records of their own species. They spoke of something called the First Silence, a being so old and terrible that 3 civilizations had united to trap it here, sacrificing themselves in the process. Yuna sat in the empty Velthari ship, surrounded by the ghosts of researchers who had died 3 centuries before, and tried to process what she had learned. She was not just in a dangerous region of space. She was inside a prison. And somewhere at the center of that prison, something was waiting. Back on the eternal horizon, Dr. Hana Cho worked without sleep. She had assembled a small team of human engineers and sympathetic alien scientists, and together they were designing the impossible, a shuttle that could survive inside the maw. The key was understanding why Yuna's suit was still transmitting. After analyzing the signal for hours, Hana realized that the suit's shielding was not actually blocking the radiation. Instead, it was deflecting it in specific patterns, creating small pockets of survivable space around the wearer. The effect was accidental, a side effect of the suit's design that no one had anticipated. But accidental or not, it worked. And if it worked for a suit, it could work for a shuttle. "We need to cover the entire hull with this material," Hana explained to Commander Baek, showing him her designs. "And we need to arrange it in exactly this pattern. The geometry matters as much as the substance." Tae-Wan studied the plans carefully. He was not an engineer, but he had commanded enough missions to know when a design was solid and when it was wishful thinking. This one felt solid. "How long to build it?" he asked. 3 days if we work around the clock. The station's fabrication systems can produce the shielding material, but applying it correctly will take time. "You have 2 days. I want to launch within 72 hours. Hana opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. She knew that every hour mattered. Yuna's heartbeat was still transmitting, still steady, but no one knew how long that would last. 2 days, she agreed. I will make it work. Word of the rescue mission spread through the station. Most of the alien species remained skeptical, convinced that Taiwan was leading his people to their deaths. But a few individuals came forward to help. A Solrine engineer who specialized in hull construction, a Karathi pilot who had spent decades studying the maw's gravitational patterns from a distance. Even one of the Velthari scientists who admitted quietly that the ambassador's certainty about human death was perhaps premature. Taiwan accepted all of them. He did not care about species or politics. He cared about skills, about determination, about the willingness to try something that everyone said was impossible. 2 more humans volunteered as well. Jisoo Kang, a pilot famous for flying through asteroid fields that navigation computers said were impassable, and Doyen Im, a combat medic who had kept soldiers alive in conditions that should have killed them 10 times over. Are you sure about this? Tae-Wan asked them both. This is not a normal rescue mission. The odds of coming back are very low. Jisoo shrugged. She was small for a pilot, but her eyes were steady and sharp. I have been flying impossible routes my whole career. This is just another one. Doyen nodded in agreement. He was tall, quiet, with the calm manner of someone who had seen too much death to be frightened by it anymore. Yuna saved my life once, during the border conflicts. She fixed my suit's oxygen system while we were pinned down by enemy fire. I owe her. Tae-Wan looked at both of them for a long moment, then nodded. Welcome to the team. Get some rest. We launch in 48 hours. As they left, Tae-Wan turned back to the window. He could not see the mall from here, but he knew exactly where it was. He could feel it, like a weight in his chest, a constant reminder of what he was about to attempt. Hold on. Yuna, he whispered, we are coming for you. Somewhere in the graveyard, Yuna finished reading the last of the Velthari logs. She saved a copy to her suit's storage, then began gathering supplies for the next leg of her journey. She had a destination now, the threshold gate, the center of the maw, the place where answers waited. She was not sure what she would find there. She was not sure she would survive the trip. But she was certain of one thing. She was not going to sit in a dead ship and wait for death. Engineers solve problems, and this was just another problem, bigger and stranger than any she had faced before, but a problem nonetheless. She sealed her helmet, checked her supplies, and stepped back into the twisted darkness of space. The shuttle was small and ugly. It had been built for short trips between ships, not for journeys into the deadliest region of known space. But Hana and her team had transformed it into something new. Every centimeter of its hull was covered in the specially patterned shielding material. Its systems had been reinforced, its engines upgraded, its life support extended to handle a week-long mission instead of a few hours. Taiwan ran his hand along the shuttle's side as he walked around it, checking for any imperfections. He found none. The work was excellent, better than he had dared to hope. "She is ready," Hana said, walking up beside him. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but her voice was steady. "The shielding pattern matches Yuna's suit exactly. In theory, you should be able to survive the same conditions she is surviving." "In theory," Taiwan repeated. "Theory is all we have. No one has ever tested this in practice." Hana paused, then added quietly, "Please bring her back." Taiwan nodded. "I intend to." The launch took place with less ceremony than Taiwan expected. A few dozen people gathered in the observation deck to watch, but most of the station's inhabitants had either given up hope or were too busy with their own work to care. Only the humans watched with real attention, their faces tight with worry and hope. The shuttle detached from the station and began its approach to the mall. Inside, Taiwan sat in the pilot's seat, with Jisoo beside him at navigation and Doyen in the back, checking medical supplies. They had planned the mission in detail, but all three of them knew that plans meant little once you entered unknown territory. Adaptation would be the key to survival. The first sign that they had crossed the threshold was the way light began to bend around them. Stars stretched into lines. Colors shifted in ways that made no physical sense. The shuttle's instruments flickered and displayed errors, just like Yuna's suit had when she first entered. "Maintaining course," Jisoo reported, her hands steady on the controls. Her voice was calm, almost bored, as if she flew through regions of warped space-time every day. "The gravitational waves are strong, but I can work with them. It is like sailing on rough water. You just need to read the currents." Taiwan watched her fly. He had chosen her for this mission because of her reputation, but seeing her skill in action was something else entirely. She moved with the chaos instead of fighting against it, adjusting their course constantly to ride the waves rather than be crushed by them. They passed through the outer boundary without major incident. The shielding held. The hull did not crack. The three humans inside remained alive and healthy, their bodies tolerating the radiation that would have killed most alien species within minutes. "Signal detected," Doyen announced from his station. "Yuna's heartbeat. It is coming from deeper inside, near a concentration of debris that looks like it might be the ship graveyard." Taewon felt his chest tighten. She was alive. Still alive, after almost 2 weeks in hell. He had believed she would be, but believing and knowing were different things. "Take us in," he ordered. On the eternal horizon, Hana monitored the shuttle's progress with growing amazement. Every piece of data coming back challenged the accepted science of the galactic community. Humans were surviving in conditions that should have been instantly lethal. Their technology was working where superior alien designs had failed. Everything the galaxy thought they knew about the Maw was being proven wrong. The Solrine scientists were the first to openly admit their confusion. "This makes no sense," their lead researcher bubbled through his translation device. "Human biology is simpler than ours, less developed. How can they survive what we cannot?" Hana tried to explain. "It is not about being more advanced, it is about being different. Humans evolved on a planet with high background radiation, constant environmental challenges, and rapid climate changes. Our bodies learn to repair themselves, to adapt, to survive hostile conditions. We are not better than you. We are just suited to different challenges." The Velthari ambassador had been listening from across the room. They approached slowly, their crystalline body humming with frequencies that suggested deep thought. "If humans can survive inside the Maw," the ambassador said carefully, "then humans might be able to reach places we have never reached. See things we have never seen. Learn secrets that have been hidden for millions of years." Hana nodded slowly, understanding what the ambassador was suggesting. This was not just about rescuing Yuna anymore. This was about what came after. If humans could explore the Maw safely, they could recover the lost ships, study the ancient technology, perhaps even discover what was really hidden at the center of this cosmic prison. The implications were enormous. Humanity, the youngest and supposedly weakest species in the galactic community, might become the key to unlocking mysteries that older civilizations had abandoned as impossible. Inside the shuttle, Taiwan watched the ship graveyard appear on their sensors. Dozens of vessels, maybe hundreds, all drifting in the strange currents of the maw. Some were ancient beyond recognition. Others were merely old. A few were recent enough that Taiwan could identify their species of origin. There, Jisoo said, pointing to a specific cluster of ships. The signal is strongest from that area. Taiwan leaned forward, straining to see through the warped light. And then he spotted her, a small figure in a white suit, moving between two dead vessels, carrying something that looked like equipment salvaged from the wrecks. Yuna, he breathed. He activated the shuttle's communication system. Lieutenant Park, this is Commander Bayek. Do you read me? Static. Then silence. Then finally a voice that made all three crew members smile, despite the danger surrounding them. Commander, is that really you? I thought I was hearing things. The radiation plays tricks on your mind sometimes. It is really me. We are in a shuttle about 2 kilometers from your position. We are coming to pick you up. There was a pause. When Yuna spoke again, her voice was different, more serious, more urgent. Commander, there is something you need to know before you come closer. I have been exploring these ships. I have found records, logs, information about this place. The maw is not natural. It is a prison. And the thing being held here is starting to wake up. Taiwan exchanged looks with Jisoo and Doyen. They had expected to find their colleagues scared and desperate, ready for immediate rescue. Instead, they had found her conducting research and making discoveries. Tell me everything, Taiwan said. For the next hour, Yuna explained what she had learned from the Velthari logs and her own observations. The threshold gate, the first silence, the ancient civilizations that had sacrificed themselves to build this prison, and the signs she had noticed in the past few days that suggested the cage was weakening. The gravitational waves are getting stronger, she said. The calm periods between them are getting shorter. Something at the center is pulling harder than before. I think the entity inside is testing its prison, looking for weaknesses. Taiwan processed this information with the calm focus he had developed over years of crisis management. How long do we have? I do not know. Days, maybe. Weeks if we are lucky. But Commander, I have an idea. The ships in this graveyard still have functional power cores. If we could connect enough of them, we might be able to reinforce the cage. Buy time. Maybe even seal it permanently. It was a crazy plan. Connect dead ships scattered across kilometers of twisted space to create some kind of improvised containment system. Any sane person would have dismissed it immediately. But Taiwan was human, and humans did not dismiss plans just because they were crazy. Tell me what you need, he said. The shuttle docked with the Velthari research ship that Yuna had made her temporary base. The airlock seals connected with a soft hiss, and then the door opened, and there she was. Yuna looked terrible. Her suit was scratched and stained, patched in a dozen places with materials salvaged from alien vessels. Her face through the helmet visor was thin and pale, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and constant stress. But she was alive. After 14 days in a place that should have killed her in seconds, she was alive. Taiwan stepped through the airlock first. He had planned to maintain professional distance, to treat this as a standard rescue operation. Those plans lasted about half a second. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides and wrapped his arms around her in a hug that almost knocked them both over. You crazy woman, he said, his voice thick. You actually survived. Yuna laughed, and the sound was like water in a desert. I told you I would figure it out. Engineers solve problems, remember? Jisoo and Doyen came through next. Doyen immediately began scanning Yuna with his medical equipment, checking her vital signs, looking for damage that needed treatment. Jisoo looked around the alien ship with obvious interest, her pilot's mind already cataloging potential resources. Your radiation levels are elevated but not dangerous, Doyen reported. Your body is handling the exposure remarkably well. I want to give you some medication to help your cells repair, but otherwise you are in better shape than I expected. Human stubbornness, Yuna said. It is more effective than any medicine. They moved deeper into the ship, to a room Yuna had converted into a command center. She had collected equipment from a dozen different vessels and somehow made it all work together. Displays showed star charts, gravitational readings, power flow diagrams, and dozens of other data streams that Taewon could only partially understand. This is everything I have learned, Yuna said, gesturing to the displays. The mall was built approximately 3 million years ago by a coalition of species we have no record of. They created a barrier of twisted space and intense radiation to imprison something they could not kill. The threshold gate at the center is the final lock on that prison, and it is failing. She pulled up a chart showing gravitational readings over time. The peaks were getting higher, the valleys shorter. The pattern was clear even to non-engineers. The entity inside is called the first silence in the records I found. I do not know exactly what it is, but the descriptions are terrifying. A being of pure entropy, a consciousness that exists by consuming other consciousness. 3 civilizations united to trap it here, and they all died in the process. Every ship, every life, every resource they had was spent building this cage. Taewon studied the displays. And you think we can reinforce it? 4 humans with a shuttle and some dead ships? Not alone, Yuna admitted, but the power cores in these ships are still functional. Most of them anyway. If we can connect them in the right pattern, we can create an energy field that strengthens the existing barrier. The original builders left instructions in some of the older ships. They knew the cage would eventually weaken. They prepared for it. She showed them the schematics she had pieced together from fragments of ancient databases. The plan was complex but elegant. A network of power sources arranged in a specific geometric pattern, feeding energy into the barrier that contained the first silence. The problem, Yuna continued, is that someone needs to activate the network from inside. The controls have to be operated manually, from a location very close to the threshold gate. And once the network activates, the gravitational forces in that area will become too intense for anyone to escape. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what she was saying. Someone would have to stay behind. Someone would have to die. No, Taewon said immediately. We will find another way. I have spent 2 weeks looking for another way. There is none. The technology is too old, too different from anything we understand. Manual activation is the only option. Then we will figure out how to do it remotely. We will build something. We will not leave anyone behind. Yuna looked at him with a mixture of affection and frustration. Commander, I have accepted this possibility. I have been alone in here for 2 weeks, thinking about death constantly. I am not afraid anymore. Fear has nothing to do with it. I did not come all this way to lose you again. They stared at each other, 2 stubborn humans refusing to back down. Jisoo and Doyeon watched awkwardly, not sure whether to intervene. Finally, Jisoo spoke up. What if we ask for help? Everyone turned to look at her. She shrugged. We have a working communicator. We can reach the station. And the station has dozens of ships from different species, all with their own power cores. If we had more power sources, could we create a stronger network? Something that does not require someone to be at the center? Yuna's eyes widened. She had not considered that possibility. She had been thinking in terms of what was available in the graveyard, not what might be brought from outside. Maybe, she said slowly, pulling up her calculations. If we had enough power, we could create a distributed activation system. Multiple trigger points instead of one central location. It would still be dangerous, but survival would be possible. How much power would we need? Taewon asked. Yuna ran the numbers. Her face changed as she looked at the result. A lot. More than any single species fleet could provide. We would need contributions from almost everyone on the station. Then we ask everyone. Commander, they will not help. The aliens have already written me off as dead. They will not risk their ships for a human they consider already lost. Taewon smiled. It was the confident smile of someone who knew something others did not. They might not risk their ships for you, but they might risk them for themselves. If this entity escapes, what happens to the rest of the galaxy? Yuna understood immediately. It spreads, it consumes. The records say it destroyed 3 civilizations before it was contained. If it gets out, nothing will stop it. Exactly. This is not about rescuing one human anymore. This is about saving everyone. And that is an argument even the most skeptical alien cannot ignore. He activated the shuttle's long-range communicator. Eternal Horizon, this is Commander Bayek. I need to speak with the Alien Council immediately. We have a situation that affects the entire galaxy. The response came quickly. Within minutes, Taiwan was explaining the threat to a room full of alien representatives thousands of kilometers away. He did not exaggerate or dramatize. He simply told them what Yuna had discovered and what they needed to do. The debate that followed was intense. The Velthari were skeptical. The Karathi were practical. The Sulreen were frightened. But in the end, they all reached the same conclusion. If the first silence escaped, none of them were safe. One by one, they agreed to contribute their ship's power cores to the containment network. When the communication ended, Yuna looked at Taiwan with something like wonder. You just convinced a dozen different species to sacrifice their ships on a human's word. How did you do that? Taiwan put a hand on her shoulder. I told them the truth. Humans are not special because we are strong or smart or old. We are special because when we see a problem, we try to fix it, even if it seems impossible, even if everyone else has given up. And sometimes that attitude is exactly what the universe needs. He squeezed her shoulder gently. Now show me how to connect these power cores. We have work to do. Yuna smiled, the first real smile she had managed in days. Yes, Commander. The next 48 hours were the most intense of Yuna's life, which was saying something considering what she had already survived. The team split up to cover more ground. Jisoo and Doyen worked their way through the ship graveyard, connecting power cores from a dozen different vessels to the growing network. Yuna and Taiwan pushed deeper into the maw toward the threshold gate itself, where the final connections had to be made. Ships arrived from the eternal horizon in a steady stream. Velthari cruisers, their crystalline hulls glowing softly in the twisted light. Sulreen vessels, spherical and filled with water, piloted by crews who watched the chaos around them with evident terror. Even Karathi fighters joined the effort, their clicking communications filling the radio frequencies as they contributed their power cores to the network. It was the first time in galactic history that every major species had worked together on a human's plan. The irony was not lost on anyone. Humanity, the youngest and supposedly least advanced species in the community, was leading an operation that would determine the fate of all life. As Yuna and Taiwan approached the threshold gate, the environment grew worse. The gravitational waves came faster now, with almost no calm periods between them. The light bent so severely that Yuna could barely tell which direction was which. Only her instruments, running on algorithms she had developed during her weeks of survival, kept them on course. And then they saw it. The threshold gate was not what Yuna had expected. She had imagined something mechanical, a structure of metal and energy like the technology she knew. Instead, it was organic, or at least it looked organic, a massive formation of twisted matter, kilometers across, pulsing with colors that had no names in any language she knew. It looked like a wound in space, like reality itself had been torn and forced to heal wrong. Behind the gate, barely visible through the distortion, something moved. Yuna felt it before she understood what she was seeing. A presence, an awareness. Something ancient and cold and hungry, pressing against its prison like water against a dam. The first silence knew they were there. It spoke to them, not in words but in feelings. Hopelessness, exhaustion, the sense that nothing they did mattered, that the universe was vast and empty, and everything would end eventually anyway. Why fight? Why struggle? Why not simply stop and let the inevitable happen? Yuna's hands trembled on her controls. The voice was seductive, in a horrible way. It promised peace. It promised an end to fear and pain and uncertainty. All she had to do was give up. Beside her, Taiwan was shaking too. She could see his jaw clenched, his knuckles white on the shuttle's armrest. But he was still moving, still fighting. It is trying to break us, he said through gritted teeth. Do not listen. Focus on the work. Yuna nodded and forced her mind back to the task. She had power cores to connect. She had calculations to check. She had a network to complete. The feelings were just feelings. They were not real. They were not her. She reached for her tools and began working. The entity pushed harder. It showed them images of failure. Every mission that had ever gone wrong. Every person who had ever died in the maw. Every ship in the graveyard. Each one a monument to someone who had tried and failed. Yuna countered with her own memories, her parents teaching her to fix broken things, her first successful engineering project in school, the look on her captain's face when she solved an impossible problem during the border wars. Every time someone had told her something could not be done, and she had done it anyway. She was human. Her species had survived ice ages. They had survived mass extinctions. They had survived each other through wars and plagues and disasters that should have ended them. Giving up was not in her blood. Connection point Alpha is ready, she reported, her voice steadier than she expected. Taiwan nodded. Moving to Beta. They worked their way around the edge of the threshold gate, connecting the final nodes of the network. The entity continued its assault, but its power seemed to be weakening. Perhaps it was spending too much energy trying to break free. Perhaps it was simply confused by creatures who would not surrender. On the eternal horizon, Dr. Hana Cho watched the power readings climb. The network was almost complete. Ships from a dozen species were feeding their energy into the containment system, creating a field of force that wrapped around the gate like a bandage around a wound. "We need more power," she announced to the Alien Council. "We are close, but not enough. The network needs to be at least 15% stronger to ensure permanent containment." The Velthari ambassador stepped forward. Their crystalline body was dim, exhausted from the constant stress of the past few days, but their voice was firm. "The Velthari contribution has been significant. We have given more than any other species, but if more is needed, we will find more." They turned to face the council. "I have watched humans for many years. I have questioned their place in our community, doubted their abilities, underestimated their potential. I was wrong. Today, a human woman survived where all our science said survival was impossible. Today, human ingenuity has given us a chance to defeat an enemy we had given up on. I say we match their courage with our own." One by one, the other species agreed. More power cores were disconnected from reserve ships. More energy flowed into the network. At the threshold gate, Yuna felt the change immediately. The containment field was strengthening, pushing back against the entity's pressure. The first silence screamed in frustration, a psychic wave that would have shattered weaker minds. "Final connection," Yuna said, reaching for the last power coupling. "Activating now." She pressed the control. The universe exploded. Not literally, but that was what it felt like. Energy poured through the network, racing from node to node at the speed of light. The containment field blazed into existence, wrapping around the threshold gate in layers of force that made the original cage look fragile by comparison. The first silence fought back. It threw everything it had against the barrier, searching for weakness, trying to find any gap in the network that it could exploit. But there were no gaps. Yuna had designed the system too well. The alien contributions had made it too strong. The gate shuddered. The twisted matter that formed it began to solidify, to stabilize. The wound in reality started to heal properly for the first time in millions of years. And then, with a final scream of rage and frustration, the first silence went quiet. Yuna collapsed against her seat, too exhausted to celebrate. Beside her, Taewan was laughing, a sound of pure relief that echoed through the shuttle. "We did it," he said. "We actually did it." Yuna managed a weak smile. "Engineers solve problems, Commander. That is what we do." Outside, the twisted space of the maw was beginning to change. The gravitational waves were weakening. The light was starting to behave normally. The impossible zone was becoming possible. Far away on the eternal horizon, a room full of aliens stared at their instruments in disbelief. The readings were clear. The containment was holding. The threat was neutralized. And a single human woman, through stubbornness and skill and sheer refusal to die, had saved them all. The journey back was nothing like the journey in, where before the shuttle had fought through chaos and uncertainty, now it glided through space that was almost peaceful. The gravitational waves had calmed to gentle ripples. The light bent softly instead of violently. The maw was no longer a death trap. It was just another difficult region of space, dangerous but survivable. Yuna slept for most of the trip. Her body, pushed beyond all reasonable limits for 2 weeks, finally demanded rest. Doyen monitored her vital signs constantly, ready to intervene if anything went wrong, but her readings remained stable. Human resilience, it seemed, extended to recovery as well as survival. Taiwan piloted while Jisoo rested in the co-pilot seat. They did not talk much. There was no need for words. They had done something impossible together, and that experience created a bond that went beyond language. As they approached the eternal horizon, the shuttle's radio came alive with messages. Congratulations from the human crew. Formal acknowledgments from the alien representatives. Even a few personal notes from individuals who had doubted the mission and wanted to apologize. The docking bay was crowded when they arrived. Every human on the station had gathered to welcome them home. Many of the aliens had come too, their various bodies creating a colorful crowd that pressed against the safety barriers. Yuna woke as the shuttle touched down. She looked through the viewport at the crowd and felt tears forming in her eyes. 2 weeks ago, she had been certain she would never see these people again. She had made peace with death in a way that only those who face it directly can understand. And now she was home. The airlock opened. Taiwan stepped out first, then Jisoo, then Doyen. The crowd cheered for each of them, but the loudest cheers were reserved for Yuna. She walked down the ramp slowly, her legs still weak from the ordeal, and was immediately surrounded by friends and colleagues who wanted to touch her, to make sure she was real, to convince themselves that this miracle had actually happened. Dr. Hana Cho pushed through the crowd and wrapped her arms around Yuna in a hug that lasted far too long and not long enough at the same time. Both women were crying, though neither would admit it later. "I knew you would survive," Hana whispered. "I knew it from the moment I found your heartbeat signal." Yuna laughed through her tears. "I almost did not. There were times when I wanted to give up, but then I remembered all the problems still waiting to be solved, and I could not let them go unsolved." The celebration continued for hours. Food appeared from somewhere, and music, and stories exchanged in a dozen different languages. Humans and aliens mixed freely, the barriers of species and culture temporarily dissolved by their shared victory. But eventually things calmed down. People returned to their duties. The station resumed its normal routines, and Yuna found herself standing on the observation deck, looking out at the space where the mall had once been. It was still there, visible as a region of slightly dimmer stars, but it no longer felt threatening. The containment network, powered by the combined resources of every species on the station, held firm. The first silence remained trapped, probably forever this time. The Velthari ambassador approached her slowly, their crystalline body humming with complex harmonics. They stood beside her for a long moment without speaking, both of them gazing at the same view. "We called it the stillness," the ambassador finally said, "because we believed nothing could live there. We sent probes and ships and brave volunteers, and they all died. We concluded that death was the only possible outcome for any being that entered that region." They turned to face Yuna directly. "You proved that belief wrong, not through superior technology or ancient wisdom, but through something we did not expect. Stubbornness, adaptability, the refusal to accept that the impossible was actually impossible." Yuna shrugged. "We are human. That is what we do." "Yes, I am beginning to understand that." The ambassador paused, their humming shifting to a thoughtful frequency. "My species is very old. We have seen many younger races rise and fall. Most of them follow predictable patterns. They grow, they expand, they encounter limits, and they either accept those limits or they destroy themselves fighting against them. And humans are different. You encounter limits and simply decide they do not apply to you. It is arrogant and foolish and occasionally dangerous. But it is also inspiring. Watching you survive in the maw, watching your colleagues refuse to abandon you, watching your species lead a coalition that has never existed before. It has changed how I think about the galaxy." The ambassador made a gesture that Yuna had learned to recognize as respect. "The Velthari would like to propose a formal partnership with humanity, not as senior and junior species, as we have treated your kind before. As equals. We believe you have much to teach us about facing the impossible." Yuna was not sure how to respond. She was an engineer, not a diplomat, but she understood the significance of what was being offered. An alliance with one of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy would change everything for humanity. I will pass your proposal to our leadership, she said carefully, but for what it is worth, I think they will accept. The ambassador hummed with what might have been pleasure. I hope so. The universe is full of challenges that older species have dismissed as unsolvable. Perhaps what we need are partners who do not know how to give up. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Later that night, Taiwan found Yuna in the engineering bay, already working on something new. She had pulled up schematics of the ship graveyard inside the maw and was making notes on possible salvage operations. You should be resting, he said. Yuna did not look up from her work. I rested on the shuttle. Now there are things to do. The ships in that graveyard contain technology from civilizations that have been dead for millions of years. Records, histories, discoveries that could change everything we know about the universe. Someone needs to organize the recovery effort. Taewon smiled. He had known her for years, but he was still sometimes surprised by her energy. And that someone has to be you? Who else? I know the graveyard better than anyone. I survived there for 2 weeks. I understand the currents, the patterns, the safe routes. She finally looked up, and her eyes were bright with excitement. Commander, we have an opportunity here that has never existed before. The Maw is navigable now. The technology in those ships could advance our civilization by centuries. How can I rest when there is so much to learn? Taiwan walked over and put his hand on her shoulder. You are remarkable. You know that. I am human. There is a difference. Is there? Yuna considered the question seriously. Maybe not. Maybe being remarkable is just the human baseline, and we never noticed because we were too busy solving problems to think about it. She turned back to her schematics. Now, are you going to help me plan this salvage mission, or are you going to stand there making philosophical observations? Taewon pulled up a chair and sat down beside her. Show me what you have got. Outside the station, the galaxy continued its endless turning. Stars were born and died. Civilizations rose and fell. Ancient beings slept in prisons built before recorded history. And somewhere in all that vastness, a species of stubborn primates from a small blue planet kept doing what they had always done, refusing to accept the impossible, treating every challenge as just another problem to solve, and changing the universe through sheer force of will. They were human, and they were just getting started.